Hello, and welcome to the session on moving beyond personalization, specifically within a retail banking context. But I reckon that everything that Madison and Nicola are going to be talking about today can be applied in a number of different contexts as well. We're getting a story from a particular light. Yeah, please feel free to ask questions, drop them in the chat, speak up if you want to, raise your hand, whatever you vibe with, and I'll keep an eye on everything here. Over to you, Maddie.
Thank you for the intro, Jess. Today, while we are looking at this through a retail banking space, the talking points are applicable to any industry. Nicola and I are going to be leading today's discussion. And to give a bit of an introduction into what we are going to be talking about, one of the first points I wanted to bring up was one of the first things I remember learning in business studies in high school. I think it was one of the first things my dad told me when he said, "You're going to get a job one day." He basically said anything you do or any reason that a service, business, or a product exists is that it either solves a challenge for someone or it delivers value of some sort. And here at Ecosystem.Ai, we often have difficulty when we are doing kind of communication and looking at our marketing and narrative and building a story about who we are and what we do. We have difficulty pinpointing a single clear problem that we solve. The reason isn't because we solve everything. It's because when you work with an enterprise or an organization and they use our product, they have a range of challenges that they need to solve from a business perspective, whether or from a business perspective, a strategic perspective, operational, customer-facing challenges. There are so many issues that any organization or any enterprise, in this example, a retail bank, is dealing with. And if you break down one challenge, take, for example, customer-facing challenges, you can break those down into more problems across the customer lifecycle, whether it's saying we need to acquire more customers, or our cost of acquisition is too high, or we need to figure out how to recuperate our costs a lot faster down the line in the maintenance stage, or we have customers dropping off at a specific stage. There are many challenges within that one space. But then also for every individual, they deal with their own unique challenges within the organization, whether you are a data scientist, head of product, head of marketing, I know we work with the head of customer value management, so head of CVM. Whatever your role is within an enterprise or an organization, you are dealing with a series of challenges that you need to solve, and you need to deliver value in some way. So you can operate across departments and find there's a lot of problems and issues that everyone is dealing with. What's important in bringing a solution to an organization is that you can handle multiple issues for multiple people and work across departments. Today, Nicola and I are going to be unpacking our solution to these issues within the retail banking space. When we talk about a solution, we are talking about a module and how it's delivered through the prediction platform. Today, we're looking at the spend personality module and its role in addressing challenges and creating value of some sort in the retail banking space. I'll be looking specifically at the customer-facing business challenge. Nicola will be unpacking the technical aspects of it. We really aim to showcase how this solution tackles challenges, acting as a sort of technical bridge, in the sense that we want to move retail banks from the current state of customer engagement, the biggest challenges that they are facing right now in that customer-facing space, and move them into a new transform state where they actually connect with their customers and have engagement that was not just personal, but also contextual. And not only looking at that kind of business aspect, but we'll also look at how through the technology and the way the solution is delivered, it works to transform and act as a technical bridge, moving retail banks from this current state of their technology, which is this legacy, outdated approach, and moves them into a future-proof state of harnessing the power of behaviorally driven AI. So that is the aim for the discussion today. As Jess mentioned, if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or drop them in the chat. We encourage an open discussion here. To begin, the first challenge right off the bat is that in retail banking, the current state of customer engagement is outdated and it's just not effective. It's not performing the way that it can. As we move into this new stage of customer expectations and what customers want from their retail bank, the type of engagement that a lot of banks are employing right now is just not effective. It's not delivering the value that it can. And before I jump into this problem and the approaches and the gaps within the space, I want to give a little bit of context and zone into the word customer within this space of customer engagement. This is a topic or an idea that Jay has spoken about a lot. Anytime a business engages with people of some sort, a business, an enterprise, an organization, whatever you may be, there are three types of ways you can kind of group people to understand how you engage with them. So you've got consumers. We all use fast-moving consumer goods, whether it's pen or toothpaste. Jay always uses the toothpaste example, whatever it may be, peanut butter, tomato sauce, whatever you use, you consume goods. And when you sit in this consumer space, what happens is that the organization you buy your peanut butter from or your tomato sauce from, they don't know anything about you. They don't know your name. They don't know who you are, where you're from. They know nothing. And they don't necessarily have a relationship with you either. What you have is essentially a relationship with the brand. A lot of people are loyal when it comes to brands. Some people only use Heinz tomato sauce. Some people only use All Gold. In that instance, you have a connection to the brand. But in terms of as people go, the company does not know who you are. Then if we take it kind of upper level, you have customers. And in this situation, the enterprise or the business that you're dealing with, they know a little bit more about the person. So a customer, in the sense, you would know their name, surname, address, email address, phone number, and what products they use. Whether in this case you're a retail bank, they will know this information. They have to know your name, surname. It's in regulation, KYC. I think your ID number is one of them, and then they'll know you have a savings account, a check account, and maybe an investment account. That's generally the surface level information they have about this customer, and it's most likely across a kind of database of millions. They tend to have millions or hundreds of thousands of customers. Because of that, it's stored in some database or a CRM. But that's how they know you: name, surname, products. Now we move up a level into this client space. And what happens here is the relationship shifts between the business and the person from being entirely transactional to more relational. The organization doesn't just know who you are. They don't just know who the person is, but they know why they engage, what they value, what their needs are, how their needs are likely to change, how best to connect with this person. The engagement's typically proactive. It's not necessarily just reactive. Like you come to me and you say you need something, it's forming that connection. And most importantly, this type of client space is guided by trust, insight, and being contextually relevant. It's not just about service availability. So a lot of retail banks and anyone in business can agree that it's in this client space where there is a lot of growth potential. When you know someone at such a level, you connect with who they are, their needs, their values, what they want on a deeper level, that's based on trust. The person is more likely to buy what you recommend because it matches who they are. It feels tailored to who that person is. I've been moved into a sales space and I'm learning about sales. And the first thing that any podcast or blog or article I've ever seen, they always say it's based on trust. When you have that trust with someone, they are more likely to buy from you, convert, you can upsell, you can cross-sell. There is room for growth. But the question is now, if that's the ideal state for a retail bank, is to say, we connect with our customers at a client level. We know the needs of every single individual person. And that's the space they want to be in for growth. The question is, how do you do that across millions? Because that's quite difficult to know millions of people at such a one-to-one level. So the answer to this kind of question is, well, how do we get there? How do we get our customers into this client space, especially across a base of millions? The answer to that is often personalized engagement. It's not about taking a generic message or a generic answer and just slapping on hello name. It's about understanding the customer, or in this case, the client's context. It's about moving beyond personalization and into contextualization. I think a lot of retail banks and organizations around the world know that this is what needs to be done to grow. They also know that AI, in any discussion, whether it's on LinkedIn or a McKinsey report, is now the kind of tool to achieving all of this. It's like we spoke about the AI button the other day. You just want to click it and it personalizes and it does everything you need. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. There's this gap and there's this block from getting banks from this state of personalized, and I use quotation marks because it's not actually personalization. Hello name is not personalization. There's this gap, these obstacles in getting banks from this state of customer engagement to client level engagement. A lot of them are still currently relying on outdated strategies or technology that just can't deliver at the level that they want. So when we unpack why is that the case, what are these challenges, what are these gaps that are preventing banks from getting from this state of customer relation to clientization, there are a range of challenges, which we will unpack a little bit later. Specifically, they are all technically challenges. So it's things like fragmented data, legacy architecture, development gaps, deployment gaps. And because of these gaps, it's forcing banks to fall back onto outdated segmentation and customer understanding approaches. I'm going to unpack a few of them. We have spoken about some of them, so I will try and be brief. Unfortunately, these approaches are things that a lot of strategies that retail banks are currently employing, and it's important to understand why they aren't the most effective. So the first one that we always mention is demographic-based segmentation. This is where you segment customers based on broad categories like age, income bracket, tax brackets, their location, and maybe what products they use. So essentially how it would look is you say, customer X sits in this zip code. They are between age 40 to 55, and they have an income over said amount. So they must fall into segment A. But the problem with this approach, which we do speak about fairly often, is that looking at these surface level traits doesn't necessarily why a customer behaves a certain way. And the example that we always use is that two people of the same demographic can have very different risk profiles, very different product needs. They may behave very differently. And the example that we always use, but unfortunately this example is now outdated, is that King Charles and Ozzy Osbourne were technically of the same demographic, but they fell into the same demographic-based category. When we actually look at who they are as people, it's safe to assume that they don't behave the same and they don't view financial products the same. They spend differently. So what's important about this demographic segmentation is that it doesn't actually speak to who a person is. It doesn't give you that client level understanding of a person. Then if we look at other approaches like the RFM approach, so recency, frequency, monetary, or if you put it more simply, it's essentially that value-based approach. This is where you segment customers based on how recently they transact, how often and how much, or you put them into type of like a value bracket to say this is a high value customer or this is a low value customer. Unfortunately, this approach tells you how much someone spends, but it doesn't necessarily tell you on what or why. For example, you can have two customers both spending $10,000 at the same time every month, but one is for an investment, the other is paying off a loan. These are two very different needs and contexts, but the RFM approach doesn't necessarily account for that. Then the same, or from a different angle, looking at the value segmentation, we have high value spenders and low value spenders. So because this customer is high value, we tend to treat them differently, give them more attention because they are viewed to have a longer lifetime value with the retail bank. The problem is someone can be a high spender, but have very little relationship with the bank. They don't engage, they don't spend that often, they don't view the bank as someone necessarily important, and they don't have that relationship with them. But they will, because they're a high value customer, they tend to get all the engagement and attention. Whereas you can have a low income customer or a low value customer, and they can use multiple bank products. They can engage consistently with you, and they are most likely to grow with you or stick with you. But the problem is they are bracketed into this low value customer segments and you don't get the attention or the engagement. They don't get the attention and the engagement that could extract a lot more value from them because they aren't viewed as important. Whereas high value customers get all the attention, but they might churn quickly because they have no interest. And then lastly, an approach that I want to unpack, which is a more advanced approach that some more modern banks are employing, is a behavior-based approach. And we'll unpack that. The main problem with a lot of banks using a behavioral approach right now is that it's purely on historical data, or it's done through batch processing. It isn't real time. So essentially, this looks at your past purchases, your past purchase data over long periods, but it's not recent enough to account for what's happening now. By the time a pattern is detected, for example, someone drop in their spending or a change in their product usage, or someone may have changed and stopped using a credit card, because it's processed in batches or it's from historical data, you've missed that moment to engage. Their behavior may already have shifted. When they employ an intervention or a recommendation based on this insight, they're reacting to what's happened, not what's happening. For example, I could stop using my credit card 2 months ago, and because the system only flags it now, they've missed the opportunity to re-engage and prevent that moment of churn. So it doesn't pick up on these subtle and often sudden changes. Life happens. We as people change. We'll see within a year our behavior can change. So guaranteed within a lifetime, our behavior will change. So while this behavioral approach is still really important and useful, it's more advanced than just a demographic-based approach. using historical data just isn't as effective today if you want to move customers into a client space. So I've essentially captured these. There are many more approaches that a lot of banks take to understand their customers. These are just the main ones that I've come across. And we do see why these are becoming less effective. They're not behavioral. Demographic-based segmentation is too surface level. It doesn't account for changes that are happening now. And it's also not dynamic. It doesn't account for the fact that I'm going to change as a person based on my behaviors, based on life. If I'm between these ages in this income and you box me into segment A, you don't account for the fact that I might be a different person a year from now or behave differently a year from now. Customer engagement doesn't connect with the individual. It feels generic. Your message tone doesn't resonate because you don't understand the motivations and behavior or the reasons why a person spends. The way you speak to them, if it's through a marketing message or an update on your app to say, here's a new savings account, buy now. The way I behave and the way I act towards financial services and spending might be more intentional and deliberate. I'm not looking to just buy now. I want something more considered and thought out. Because you don't know that about me and my context, you're engaging with me in a way that doesn't connect. And on top of that, you might be offering a product that I don't actually need. If I'm trying to focus on saving, don't make a credit card recommendation. Or if I am struggling to save right now, don't recommend a massive investment account that requires, $10,000 lump sum. So essentially, when you don't account for, or when you fall back onto these outdated approaches, you have ineffective engagement. And essentially, you have customers that stay customers, don't become clients. That said, these approaches do still have value in some instances. They aren't entirely useless. They may not be as important as modern approaches or as effective, but there is still a time and place for these approaches. So for early stage segmentation, when you don't have all that behavioral data, it's important to have that demographic-led segment a customer. Often for regulatory or compliance reporting, we'll need to know things like income or tax bracket. And also for high-level strategic planning, these approaches still have a time and a place. The reason I'm saying that now is because as we unpack the solution and get into what's this ideal state of customer engagement and what's the way to get there, I want to make a note that it's not about just scrapping whatever the retail bank uses. It's about augmenting the current approach. It's about saying, okay, what's the new effective approach and adding that onto what we currently do. Now that I've looked at the problem and the challenges and why a lot of these methods are outdated, if we want to take clients or customers from that customer space to that client space, what does that type of engagement look like? What is that contextually relevant way to connect with someone in the retail banking space? So to kind of paint a picture, to just give you, in a rule of threes, it's essentially something that is timely, contextually relevant, and behaviorally driven. If you want to speak to me in a way that connects with me, looking at the tone. If I've said that I'm intentional and I'm deliberate when it comes to financial products, send me a recommendation or an offer in a way that matches that. It's also about the channel. I engage through my banking app a lot. So if you are going to make a recommendation, make it through there. I check that every day. I don't look at my emails. So it's pointless trying to tell me about this amazing new savings product that is right up my alley, but through a channel that I just don't engage with. Obviously, as I mentioned, it's also about the product. Understand where I am within my financial space right now. If I'm trying to save, recommend a savings product or an investment product, don't recommend something that is irrelevant to me. What's important in understanding product recommendation is that it's not just about offering or recommending the product that is the most profitable for the retail bank. It's about saying, what does this person actually need right now? That's how you connect with someone. It's seeing their needs and understanding them at that client level is knowing what they need and why. Also timing. Don't make a product recommendation at a time when I'm less likely to engage. It's about catching me in the moment and saying, I have the intent, I'm ready for it. Let's get this person what she needs. So that's what the ideal customer engagement looks like. But there's now going to be a couple methods for, okay, well, how do you actually do that? That's great to say, but what's the how-to? Essentially, retail banks need a segmentation method that includes behavioral modeling, continuous learning, and personality scoring. And that is where we come to our solution now, which is spend personality. So we have spoken about spend personality a lot. So I am just going to give a little bit of context and explain the how-tos. But essentially, spend personality is one of our pre-configured modules. And what it does is it analyzes transactional data to uncover the what, why, how, and when customers spend. It extracts behavioral evidence from transactional data. Using those insights and that evidence, it then assigns a dynamic personality score across 6 different personalities. These personalities include intentional, industrious, experiential, enthusiastic, introvert and extrovert. These different personalities account for the different motivations and the intent behind how people spend. Jess, please correct me, it's based on the ocean model, right?
So it's inspired by the ocean model in that every person will ultimately have a score across all 6 different areas. So you'll see that somebody might be 0.5 in experiential and a 0.3 in industrious. But the point is that you'll have varying degrees of each personality type within a spending profile.
Thank you. Perfect. Just to kind of give a snippet about like how these different behaviors, can be reflected. If we look at someone like an intentional spender, they are often more calculated in their purchases, whereas I think an experiential spender or an enthusiastic spender, they're a bit more spontaneous. They are an impulse buyer, we could say. That's just a glimpse into, the different personalities and how they then reflect different spending behaviors. But now what's important then is to now look at the different features within this module that transform and take banks from their current stage of segmentation and customer understanding. So the first core feature is personality scoring. By gaining that understanding or getting that behavioral evidence from transactional data, you assign a score across 6 different personalities. And what's important about that is the segmentation method. It's dimensional. So like Jess said, it's across different personalities. It doesn't just box people in. You are fluid, you are dynamic. And most importantly, it's based on financial behavior or spending behavior. So that's the next aspect that I want to get to is behavioral modeling. This aspect of spend personality brings together artificial intelligence and human decision making. It integrates principles from behavioral economics, cognitive psychology, and social theory. It interprets not just what the customer does, but why they do it. Unlike demographic-based segmentation or value-based segmentation, which operates or kind of create models that operate solely on surface level metrics like frequency or spend amount. Spend personality goes into the psychological drivers of a person. So loss aversion, intent, social influence, cognitive bias, all of these different aspects. And then what you get is AI that makes human-centered predictions. It's about connecting with people. And it's then grounded in real decision-making frameworks. The next important aspect about that is not only does it capture these behavioral profiles, it evolves with their life changes. This is a concept we've discussed before, which is personality drift, which essentially is how you will move between different personalities based on context. We're going into December soon. All of our personalities are most likely going to change just based on festivities and spending and being with family. So that's why one of the next most important aspects of spend personality is continuous learning. This means that the system essentially operates on the assumption that no human being remains the same. And the reason it's so important is that from a technical perspective, it allows the algorithms to adjust to changing customer behaviors, most importantly in real time. As I mentioned, batch processing is not effective. We have a common saying with the team, life happens in the moment, not in batches. So you can't necessarily have batch processing as a way to connect with customers or clients in the moment. It's powered by advanced machine learning, which means that the system constantly refines these personality insights and then the predictive models based on these live customer interactions, but also the evolving behavioral evidence within the transaction data. Now that we've looked at these core aspects of this approach and how retail banks can understand their customers, it also allows them to act accordingly. When delivered through the prediction platform, you can make recommendations through tone, timing, and channel that actually connects with people at the other end. So now I've captured the main challenge that a lot of retail banks are dealing with in terms of their customer engagement and highlighted this ideal state of clientization. And we've looked at the different aspects and why they aren't that effective. But the question now is, well, how can banks take advantage of this opportunity? There are a range of technical gaps that prevent retail banks from adopting this approach, whether it's fragmented data, legacy architecture, infrastructure, deployment tools. I'm going to now hand over to Nicola because this is where the technical gaps and the challenges come in. And now we're going to unpack that in terms of the technical solutions. So Nicola, over to you.
Thanks, Maddie. It's going to be hard to follow that up. Maddie has been talking mostly about one of our vertical behavioral-based solutions, which is spend personality. And we have a few of them. Intelligent sales is one of them. Interaction science is one of them. They're basically areas that we've identified that require some focus the only way that you can make these solutions sustainable, especially for an enterprise environment, is to deliver them through a platform. And that's why we always say it's the solution delivered through the prediction platform, because that's what sets us apart. We're not just a vertical solution, we come with an entire platform as well. The reason for this is that we have identified 3 key characteristics that businesses need to consider before they take on new technology. 3 questions or checkboxes that they need to cycle through before they take it on. The first one would be speed. Is the technology going to start producing measurable value as soon as it's implemented? How long is it going to take before it produces value? Modules like Spend Personality are our kind of solution for that, because they are pre-configured and they mesh together the technologies that we've identified to be most advantageous for that specific problem. So we've got speed covered there. The second characteristic is scale. So you don't want to max out all the capabilities as soon as you have a certain technology implemented. You want to be able to scale it across your entire customer base. So you need the compute to allow for that. I'll go into that a bit later of how we scale horizontally. Third thing that you need is longevity. So you want to make sure that the technology is flexible and adaptable enough to integrate into any other future disruptions in the market. And since we are in the age of AI, there are going to be disruptions and more of them. So you don't want your tech to lock you in and make you only use that solution and then force you to miss all the opportunities that come around. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the technical features of the platform that kind of enable us to hold up these 3 pillars that we've identified: the speed, scale, and longevity. The first one is that we are headless or accessible. Simply put, it basically means that the sum of all our capabilities sit in the back end, and that back end is accessible through APIs. And we have several different ways that you can communicate with that back end, one of them being a low-code environment, which is the workbench, or you can use our Python notebooks, which allows you to have more hands-on coding. And then you can also host us locally in your environment. But you can integrate us into anything because we have that API access. There is another way that you could interpret headless. Another way you could interpret this is that we are entirely configurable. Every server is accessible through API endpoints. API endpoints are responsible for telling the server what to do. They pass instructions to the server, and the server returns them to the entity that did the API call. The opposite of that would be, I don't know what the opposite of headless is, like headed entity would mean that whenever you want to make a change to your server or configuration, you'd have to completely rebuild it. But we don't require that because you can push configurations to API endpoints as you go. So you can, through the workbench, create a configuration, and we literally have a button that says push, and then that gets sent to an API endpoint, and that basically implements the change. I kind of put together this analogy. I'm not sure if it works at all, but in my mind, I thought of a server at a restaurant who's cooking pasta. So a server with a head, I mean, a headless server would be a bit horrific, but a headed server who has these 3 API endpoints that tell it to make pasta, cook pasta, or make pasta sauce. So make the pasta from scratch, or cook it, or make the sauce. So then the push functionality that we have means that you can say, okay, cool, you can still cook the pasta, make it from scratch, but I want tagliatelle, or I want penne, or I want spaghetti. So while the API endpoints look the same, the configurations on the push functionality allows you to change the output. So you've got this kind of changing on the fly aspect. That also speaks to the speed, because it means you don't have to pull your solution out of production every time you want to change it. The configuration side allows you to change as you go, which means you will have measurable value sooner. It also allows you to skip all that bureaucratic tape, because when you're rebuilding servers, you have to go through all the steps of getting it implemented again. But if you're pushing configurations as you go, you can skip all of that. Another one is the fact that we don't have downtime, and we have several clients that can speak to this. The fact that you can configure on the fly means that you never have to bring your solutions out of production. So you're continuously running due to our general design and reliability of the infrastructure. We've proven to be very reliable and have no downtime. The next component is that our architecture is a worker architecture. You can see it as a web of many virtual mini computers. These mini computers are called containers, which are also called workers, hence the worker architecture. And the reason they're called workers is because each container is responsible for doing a specific task. They have all the dependencies and runtimes they need to fulfill it. They don't depend on one another to fulfill a task. This means that one container could handle about 50 interactions at a time. But when you want to scale to be serving millions of customers at a time, you spin up a new container. And because of our integration with technologies like Kubernetes and OpenShift, you can do things like spin up new containers on the fly as compute increases, like demand of compute, and then you can shut them down once the demand decreases. This is what makes us horizontally scalable. I mentioned scale earlier as one of the key aspects that businesses should be aware of. When you require more compute, you don't need to add on anything. When you have to build out a computer, make it bigger, and that obviously has an end point. There's only so big of a computer that you can build, whereas horizontal scaling is using many computers to perform tasks, which is what our architecture does. Another aspect is our ecosystem approach, and this is the fact that we make use of many open source technologies. I mentioned Kubernetes and OpenShift, but we also use development tools like Git and Docker and Jupyter Notebooks. We also have dashboards. Superset is a business dashboard where you can track business value, and the real-time dashboard Grafana, where you can see how things are happening and you monitor them in real time. And we also have database technologies like MongoDB and Presto, and the list goes on. It basically speaks to this whole reinvent the wheel approach. We've taken all the tech that we find to be the coolest and the most relevant for customer engagement specifically. We've added a behavioral layer to it, and this aspect of easy access and configuration. Good business solutions require a village to raise. It's not just one plug and play solution, it's many solutions brought together. Another important aspect of our platform is that we deliver results in real time. This means different things to different companies. Some companies think that 5 minutes is real time, others think a few seconds. But because we're dealing with enterprises engaging with many millions of people, the results are needed immediately. They are computing a lot as well, so it adds time. We make sure that our processes don't add more time to that. We try to keep it as low as possible, and I think the lowest is 5 milliseconds. Anything longer than 300 milliseconds is not real time anymore. I think that's already pushing it, because you have to consider what time the business's front end is going to add to that. Yeah, that's also made possible by the architecture because of the kind of distribution of tasks. When the server receives a request, it doesn't have to wait for the computer to be available again to take over the task. It can just direct it to a container that's not busy at that time. So that contributes to that ultra low latency that we have. Then, of course, we have the behavioral algorithms, and spend personality runs on the spend personality algorithm. And because of the way that our product is configurable, you can apply this in many different ways. Generally, how personality works is you need about a year's worth of transactional data from the customer. That will include basic information like customer information, where they spent the money, how much money they spent, and the MCC code. So those are categorization, saying whether the spend fell under entertainment, groceries, or healthcare. And then you run this transactional data through the spend personality algorithm, which returns a personality score. There are many ways to do the scoring, but one is to do it in feature engineering, where you ingest data and run it through the algorithm, and it produces features which you can include in your data. And that feature would be this personality score. Maddie mentioned that the personality scores are made up of about 6 different personalities. The range aspect is that you could have someone that scores a 7 on experiential, but 3 on introversion. That gives a more nuanced perspective of the customer, and you can do what you want with that, whether you want to box them into experiential because they're mostly that, or if you want to give it more of a nuanced approach, you can do that. And you can choose to score your customers as many times as you want. You can score them every week, every month. You can choose to score them at runtime, which basically means that as they do an action, you can score what that action told you about them. And that can make it very kind of contextual, because it tells you that what their current mood is. If it's something that's very abnormal of them to do, you can try and see if they might respond to something else that falls into a similar category. So if they are not typically an experiential spender, but they're now making a big purchase and booking a trip overseas, you might want to experiment and like kind of ride that wave of novelty seeking and recommend something else. Spend personality is not just one thing, it's many things. You can apply it in messaging, website, display, anything you want really. So I just wanted to go a bit more into depth than I have before with the tech. Ramsey's silence seems to be a good thing. I think because spend personality is delivered through the prediction platform, it carries that flexibility, reliability, and ease of integration. And you can't really talk about the modules without talking about the platform. That speaks directly to what Maddie was saying about how we struggle to define what problem it is that we solve, because we just do solve so many. Thank you. I think that's all for me.
Thank you, Nicola. I really loved your pasta analogy. I feel like that always helps us get through the tech details. We have a question in the chat from Jan. Do we have something similar for bank assurance entities? I'm going to say yes, because bank assurance is where you can sell insurance products through the bank. There's a type of partnership. If I can compare it to something like the partner programs that the bank would have with rewards, there is that space to make recommendations and offer insurance products through the bank. There are other modules involved. So for example, interaction science, that understands how customers or people interact with their app. How long do they stay? Are they exploring, or are they just there to browse? Do they have a high intent? That type of behavioral based algorithm or module is also applicable in this space. The one thing I will say though, it is applicable even when you don't have a lot of engagement with insurance products or services. The only instance I know where it's difficult to have this level of recommendation and understanding of the customer is for a product like life insurance, because that's kind of like a once-off purchase and then a once-off claim, unfortunately. Whereas if it's those short-term insurance products like your car insurance or your device insurance, something like that, there is the opportunity to understand what customers are spending and what their behavioral profile is, and then make that insurance product recommendation. That doesn't happen that often. But we also have modules like Ecogentic that can assist with customer agent assistance. So working with customer agents that make the insurance product recommendations. So I hope that answers your question. It would be nice if Jay was here, because he could answer it a lot better. Thank you so much. Also, a huge thank you to Nicola for the technical overview. As I mentioned at the beginning, just to wrap it all up, we unpacked a couple challenges, but I did mention that it's also about delivering value. So it's always great ending on okay, well, why is this great for your business? And I want to just look at from a customer facing perspective. When you move customers into that client space, you essentially have higher engagement and conversion. So when you have product recommendations that actually work with the customer, they are more likely to act on it. And then at a basic level, that just increases your rate of conversion. You are selling more, which means you're growing and you're getting higher profits, higher revenue. It also reduces that waste of outreach. It's important to know what recommendation to make, but it's also important to know when to make a recommendation. So don't waste any of your marketing budget on people that aren't necessarily interested. Then from a technical perspective, as Nicola's unpacked, there are a range of technical benefits that we have here. So when you're looking at that build versus buy dilemma, you want something that has that increased time to value, and through the modules that act quickly, you can see value quickly. But as any retail bank and enterprise wants, they do want something customizable. If everyone had the same vertical solution, then no one would be competitive anymore. So you do want something configurable, and that's exactly what the platform does for you. It allows you to remain future proof because technology is going to change. We live in the age of AI, and you do not want something that forces you into vendor lock-in. So you want to be able to adapt and move as your business changes. That is everything from our side today. A huge thank you to everyone who joined and who had questions. Thank you, Nicola, for the technical overview.
Thanks.